Marcus Chen had never imagined himself at the center of anything important. He was just an engineer, a guy who fixed things and designed better systems for humanity's growing colonies. Yet here he was, walking through the crystalline halls of Zenith Station, representing Earth at the biggest diplomatic gathering in the galaxy. The station was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Every surface gleamed with colors Marcus didn't have names for. Aliens of dozens of species moved through the corridors, some floating, some walking on more legs than seemed necessary, others shifting through forms that made his eyes water. Humanity had been part of this galactic community for only 15 years, and Marcus still felt like a child who had wandered into a room full of adults. Stay close to the delegation, Ambassador Victoria Okonkwo had told him that morning. Don't make promises, don't accept gifts, and for heaven's sake, don't insult anyone accidentally. Marcus had nodded. Terrified he would do exactly that. The opening reception was held in a massive dome that showed the stars, outside in perfect clarity. Hundreds of beings gathered there, their translators creating a gentle hum of overlapping conversations. Marcus stood near the human delegation, trying to look confident while nursing a drink that tasted like fizzy metal. That was when he saw her. She stood with a group of tall, elegant beings on the far side of the hall. Her skin shimmered with colors that shifted from blue to purple to silver as she moved. She had 4 arms, graceful and thin, and wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid light. Her face was angular but beautiful in a way that transcended species. She was clearly important, surrounded by attendants and other dignitaries. The Velkari, Marcus remembered from his briefing, one of the most powerful species in the Concordance. They controlled trade routes, held ancient technologies, and had a reputation for being impossible to deceive because of their telepathic abilities. The woman's eyes swept across the room and locked onto Marcus. She froze completely, every one of her 4 arms going still. Marcus felt a strange jolt, like static electricity running down his spine. He couldn't look away. The woman leaned toward one of her companions, her lips moving rapidly. Even across the crowded hall, the translator in Marcus's ear caught a fragment of her words. "He's my husband." Marcus blinked. He must have misheard. That was impossible. He had never seen this woman before in his life, but she was moving toward him now, cutting through the crowd with purpose. Her entourage followed, creating a wake of surprised murmurs. Other beings stepped aside, their expressions ranging from curiosity to shock. Ambassador, Marcus hissed to Okonkwo, who was deep in conversation with a being that looked like a floating jellyfish. "We have a situation." Before Okonkwo could respond, the Velkari woman stood before Marcus. Up close, she was even more striking. Her eyes were like opals, reflecting light in impossible ways. She studied his face with an intensity that made him want to step back, but diplomatic training kept him rooted in place. "Hello," Marcus managed, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm Marcus Chen, with the Earth delegation." "I know who you are," the woman said. Her voice was melodious, like 3 notes played in harmony. "I am Lady Shavara of the Velkari High Council, and you are my soul-bonded partner." The words hung in the air. Around them, conversations stopped. Marcus was aware of dozens of eyes turning toward them, aware of Ambassador Okonkwo's sharp intake of breath behind him. "I think there's been a mistake," Marcus said carefully. "We've never met before." "Not in the waking world," Shavara replied. "But I have known you for 3 cycles. I have seen you in my dreams, heard your voice, felt your presence. You are my Kalshima, my destined bond." Marcus's mind raced. He knew a little about Velkari customs from his briefing. The Kalshima was their most sacred tradition, a form of pride in his soul bonding that was supposed to be absolute and unbreakable. Claiming someone as a soul bond was not done lightly. Rejecting such a claim was considered a terrible insult. Lady Shavara, Ambassador Okonkwo, stepped forward smoothly, her diplomatic smile fixed in place. What an honor to meet you. Perhaps we should discuss this matter in a more private setting. I'm sure there's been some confusion. There is no confusion, Shavara said, though her tone remained courteous. I understand this must be surprising for you. Humans are new to our customs. But the Kalshima does not make mistakes. I recognized him the moment I saw him. The council must be informed. The council? Marcus echoed weakly. One of Shavara's attendants, a shorter Valkyrie with dark blue skin, stepped forward. Lady Shavara's claim must be verified according to our laws. If she has truly recognized her soul bonded, it must be witnessed and recorded. This is a matter of significant importance. Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was spiraling out of control fast. He glanced at Ambassador Okonkwo, who had the look of someone doing rapid calculations behind her calm exterior. Of course, Okonkwo said. We respect Valkyrie traditions. Perhaps we can arrange a formal meeting tomorrow to discuss the proper procedures. Tonight, Shavara said firmly but not unkindly. The recognition has occurred. Delay would be improper and suspicious. I have already sent word to the Valkyrie Council representatives here. They will convene within the hour. Marcus wanted to protest, to say this was insane, that he was just an engineer who had come here to discuss water filtration systems, not to be claimed by an alien noble as her mystical husband. But he caught Okonkwo's warning glance. Marcus, Okonkwo said quietly, pulling him aside while Shavara spoke with her attendants. I know this is overwhelming, but the Valkyrie control technologies we desperately need. Their trade routes are essential for our colonies. We cannot afford to offend them. So, what am I supposed to do? Marcus asked, feeling panic rising in his chest. Just go along with this? For now, yes. We'll play along, gather information, and figure out what's actually happening here. There has to be a logical explanation. Maybe their telepathy picked up something from you, or there's been some kind of mistake in their process. But until we know, we need to be careful. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit. This is insane. Welcome to galactic diplomacy, Okonkwo said dryly. Just be polite, answer honestly, and don't agree to anything permanent. Can you do that? Marcus took a deep breath and nodded. I can try. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself being escorted through the station's corridors by Shavara's entourage. The Valkyrie moved with fluid grace, their robes making soft sounds like wind through leaves. Shavara walked beside him, maintaining a respectful distance, but glancing at him occasionally with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're afraid, she said suddenly. Is that something you can sense? Marcus asked. The telepathy? I don't need telepathy to see it, Shavara replied. Your shoulders are tense, and you keep looking at the exits. I understand this is strange for you. It is strange for me as well, in its own way. I have dreamed of this moment for so long that reality feels less solid than the visions. About that, Marcus said. These dreams. What exactly did you see? You, Shavara said simply. Your face, your voice, moments we have not yet shared. I saw you standing under Earth's moon, holding my hand. I saw you laughing at something I said. I saw you working on a machine I did not recognize, your fingers moving with such certainty and skill. I saw you in danger, and I saw you safe. The Kalshama shows us fragments, not a complete story. Marcus wanted to find a rational explanation for all of this. Coincidence, maybe. Or some kind of telepathic interference. But something about the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, made him uneasy. They passed other aliens in the corridors, and Marcus noticed something disturbing. Every Valkyrie they encountered stopped and stared at him. Some looked awed. Others looked afraid. A few whispered rapidly to each other. their words too quick for his translator to catch. "Why are they looking at me like that?" Marcus asked. Shivara was quiet for a moment. "Because if you are truly my Kalshima, and if the bond is verified, then you are not just my husband. You are the fulfillment of a very old prophecy. And prophecies, Marcus-chan, are dangerous things." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, they arrived at a large door that opened into a circular chamber. Inside, several Valkyrie waited, along with holographic projections of others joining remotely. Ambassador Okonkwo was already there, seated with other human representatives. Marcus took his place across from Shivara, separated by a low table that glowed with soft light. The chamber fell silent as an elderly Valkyrie, his skin more gray than blue, raised one of his hands. "Let the verification begin," he said. "Lady Shivara has claimed recognition of her Kalshima. Let us hear her testimony and examine the truth of this bond." Marcus swallowed hard and tried to steady his breathing. Whatever happened next would change everything. He just didn't know how yet. The chamber was quiet except for the soft hum of holographic projectors. Marcus sat across from Shivara, feeling like he was on trial for a crime he didn't understand. The elderly Valkyrie, who had spoken earlier, sat at the head of the table, flanked by other council members, both physical and holographic. "I am Elder Thalvin," the gray-skinned Valkyrie said. "I will oversee this verification. Lady Shivara, you claim this human is your Kalshima. This is not a claim made lightly. Explain your recognition." Shivara placed all four of her hands flat on the table. A gesture Marcus's briefing had mentioned meant sincerity and openness among her people. "3 cycles ago," she began, "I began experiencing the dreams. At first, they were unclear, just impressions of a presence I did not recognize. But they grew stronger. I saw a man from a species I had never encountered, with dark hair and eyes the color of Earth's soil. I heard him speak in a language I did not know, but I understood his meaning through the bond. I felt his emotions, his determination, his fear, his hope." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The way she described it sounded so certain, so detailed. But it had to be coincidence. Dreams were just dreams. "The visions came frequently," Shivara continued. "I saw him repairing a device, his hand steady and sure. I saw a scar on his left shoulder, shaped like a crescent. I felt his presence most strongly when he was focused, working on something complex. And I saw his fear of deep water, of drowning, of being trapped beneath waves that have no end." Marcus's breath caught. The scar on his shoulder was from a childhood accident, falling from a tree when he was 8. Nobody here would know about that unless they had accessed his medical records, which would be a serious breach of protocol. And the nightmare about drowning, he had never told anyone about that except his sister. It was a recurring dream he'd had since he was a child, about drowning in an ocean that looked like stars. "This proves nothing," Ambassador Okonkwo said carefully. "These details could have been obtained through surveillance or data breaches. We cannot base such an important claim on information that might have been gathered through other means." "The ambassador raises a fair point," Elder Thalvin said. "Lady Shivara, do you have other evidence?" "I have kept a dream journal," Shivara said. One of her attendants brought forward a small device that projected images into the air. Marcus saw his own face rendered in holographic light, along with Valkyrie script that his translator worked to decode. These entries are dated and verified by our temple records. They began 3 cycles ago, before humanity had even announced their delegates for this summit. Before Marcus Chun's name appeared on any public list. The council members examined the records, their expressions thoughtful. Marcus stared at the holographic images of himself from Shivara's dreams. They were accurate, disturbingly so. One showed him laughing, another showed him concentrating on something in his hands. Another showed him looking up at stars with an expression of wonder. "How is this possible?" Marcus asked, unable to stay quiet. "I've never met you. I've never even been near Valkyrie space until this week." "The Kalshama transcends physical distance," Shavara said, turning those opal eyes on him. "It is a connection of consciousness, of souls if you prefer that term. When two beings are meant to bond, the universe itself creates pathways between them. Dreams are the first sign. Recognition is the second. The full bond comes after." "That sounds like mysticism, not science," Marcus said. "Your species makes such a rigid distinction between the two," Shavara replied, but her tone was not mocking. "We do not. Consciousness is a quantum phenomenon. Entanglement can occur across vast distances. What you call mysticism, we call physics you have not yet discovered." Elder Thalvin raised a hand for silence. "The evidence is substantial, but not conclusive. We will proceed to the traditional test. Marcus Chun of Earth, do you consent to attempt a bonding meditation with Lady Shavara? This will determine if the Kalshama connection truly exists between you." Marcus looked at Ambassador Okonkwo, who gave a small nod. They had discussed this possibility before the meeting. Refusing would be seen as an insult. Going through with it was the only way to prove this was all some kind of mistake. "What does this test involve?" Marcus asked. "You and Lady Shavara will enter a meditative state together," Thalvin explained. "Our psionic specialists will monitor both of you. If you are truly Kalshama, a temporary telepathic link will form naturally, without effort. You will feel each other's surface emotions, perhaps see brief images from each other's thoughts. If you are not bonded, nothing will happen. The test is completely safe and has been used for thousands of cycles. And if something does happen," Marcus asked, "does that prove we're supposed to be married or whatever this is?" "It proves the connection exists," Shavara said. "What we do with that connection is another matter. But yes, traditionally, verified Kalshama bonds lead to formal union. It is our way." Marcus took a deep breath. "Okay, let's do this." They were moved to a smaller adjacent chamber. The walls here glowed with soft, pulsing light that seemed designed to be calming. Cushions were arranged in a circle, and some kind of device hummed in the center, creating a gentle harmonic sound that Marcus felt in his bones. He and Shavara sat across from each other, closer now than they had been. She folded her forearms in a complex pattern that looked both natural and ritual. Marcus tried to copy her meditative posture with his two arms and felt awkward doing it. "Close your eyes," a Valkyrie psionic specialist instructed. She was a woman with deep purple skin and intricate patterns marked on her face. "Breathe slowly. Let your thoughts settle like dust after a storm. Do not try to force anything. If the connection exists, it will come to you like water finding its level." Marcus closed his eyes and tried to clear his mind. This was stupid. Nothing was going to happen. This was all some kind of elaborate misunderstanding, or maybe even a scam. In a few minutes, they would open their eyes. Nothing would have happened, and he could go back to being a normal engineer at a boring summit. But as his breathing slowed, as the harmonic sound filled his awareness, Marcus felt something change. It started as a warmth in his chest, like he had drunk something hot. Then it spread, becoming a presence that wasn't quite thought and wasn't quite feeling. It was like standing in a room and suddenly realizing someone else was there with you, even though you couldn't see them. And then he felt her Shavara's as emotions washed over him. Not overwhelming, but distinct from his own. He felt her curiosity, her nervousness, her hope, and underneath it all, a deep loneliness that surprised him. She was powerful and important and surrounded by people, but she felt alone in a way Marcus recognized because he felt the two dot images flickered at the edges of his awareness. He saw himself through her eyes, sitting in this chamber. He saw a memory of her childhood, playing in gardens beneath a purple sky. He saw her standing in a council chamber, making decisions that affected billions, and feeling the weight of those decisions like stones on her shoulders. Then something else came, unbidden. A vision that felt more real than memory. Marcus saw himself standing in a garden under 2 moons. Shivara stood beside him, and he was holding one of her hands in his. They were talking about something, laughing, comfortable with each other in a way that spoke of years of companionship. The vision felt like a memory of something that hadn't happened yet, and it made his heart ache with a strange sense of loss and longing. Marcus's eyes snapped open. He was breathing hard, his heart pounding. Across from him, Shivara's eyes were also open, and she was looking at him with an expression that was both triumphant and sad. "You felt it," she said softly. It wasn't a question. Marcus couldn't deny it. "I felt something. I don't know what it was." The psionics specialist was checking readings on a device Marcus couldn't see. The connection formed, she announced to the waiting council members. Clear emotional resonance, shared image transfer, and quantum coherence markers consistent with Kalshima bonding. "The test is positive." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some of the Velkari looked pleased. Others looked troubled. Ambassador Okonkwo's expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus could see the concern in her eyes. "Then it is verified," Elder Thalvin said. "Lady Shivara has correctly identified her Kalshima. This is a momentous occasion. The first verified soul bond between a Velkari and a human. The council will need time to consider the implications." Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. This couldn't be happening. He was an engineer. He fixed water filtration systems. He wasn't supposed to be psychically bonded to an alien noble he had never met before today. "I need air," Marcus said, standing abruptly. "I need to think." "Of course," Shivara said, rising as well. "This is overwhelming for you. I understand. Perhaps we could walk together? I find movement helps to clear the mind." Marcus wanted to refuse, to be alone, but something in her expression stopped him. She looked almost as shaken as he felt, despite her composure. Whatever had just happened, it had affected her too. "Okay," he said. "A short walk." They left the chamber with only a small escort, giving them some privacy. The station's corridors were quieter now, most delegates having retired. Marcus barely slept that night. His quarters on Xena Station were comfortable, but felt alien, with walls that changed color based on his mood, and a bed that adjusted itself in ways he found unsettling rather than relaxing. He kept replaying the meditation, the feeling of Shivara's consciousness touching his, the vision of a future that might never happen. By morning, he had made a decision. If he was going to be pulled into galactic politics and ancient prophecies, he needed to understand what he was dealing with. He needed to know Shivara, not as some mystical soul bond or political figure, but as a person. The message he sent her was simple. "Can we spend today together? Just talking. No councils, no ceremonies, no politics. I need to understand who you are." Her response came within minutes. "I would like that very much. Meet me at the Biodome Gardens in 1 hour." The Biodome was one of Xena Station's wonders, a massive enclosed space that housed ecosystems from dozens of worlds. Marcus found Shivara waiting by a grove of trees with silver bark and leaves that chimed like bells in the artificial breeze. She wore simpler robes today, less formal, though still elegant. "Thank you for meeting me," Marcus said. "I should thank you," Shivara replied. "I suggested yesterday that we spend time together, but I was prepared for you to refuse. To need distance after everything that happened." "I thought about it," Marcus admitted. "But running away doesn't solve anything. And if we're supposedly bonded, maybe we should at least try to get to know each other." They walked through the gardens, past flowering plants that filled the air with scents both familiar and strange. At first, the conversation was awkward, both of them dancing around the enormous thing between them. But gradually, they found easier topics. "Tell me about your work," Shivara said. "You're an engineer, yes?" "Water purification and distribution systems," Marcus said. "Not glamorous, but important. Earth's colonies need reliable water, and a lot of the planets we settle don't have easily accessible supplies. I design systems that can extract and purify water from difficult sources. Underground reserves, ice deposits, even atmospheric moisture. That is more important than you give credit for," Shivara said. "Water is life. Without it, colonies fail. Your work saves lives, Marcus-chan." Marcus felt himself relax slightly. "What about you? What does a Velkari noble actually do?" "I oversee trade negotiations between my house and other species," Shivara said. "I represent Velkari interests in the Concordance. I mediate disputes, arrange alliances, and try to prevent the kind of wars that nearly destroyed my people centuries ago." She paused by a fountain, watching water cascade over crystalline stones. "It is exhausting work. Every conversation has 3 meanings. Every gesture can be interpreted as either peace or threat. I must be perfect always, or people die." The weight in her voice was something Marcus recognized. He had felt it himself, though on a much smaller scale. The pressure of knowing that if you failed, lives were at stake. "That sounds lonely," Marcus said. "It is," Shivara said simply. "My position isolates me. I have servants, advisors, guards, but no friends. No one I can simply be myself with." When the Kalshama dreams began, part of me hoped they were real because they promised something I had nearly given up on. Connection, partnership, someone who saw me, not my title. "And now you're stuck with me," Marcus said with a slight smile. "A water engineer from a species that just figured out faster than light travel 15 years ago. You say that as if it diminishes you," Shivara said, turning to face him fully. "But I find it remarkable. Your species went from primitive chemical rockets to joining the Concordance in less than a single generation. The adaptability, the determination, the sheer audacity of humanity is something we have studied with great interest. Some species take millennia to develop what you achieved in decades. We're good at learning fast," Marcus said. "Usually because we're desperate and have no choice. That is what makes you formidable," Shivara said. "Desperation with intelligence is a powerful combination." They walked further, finding a bench beneath a canopy of plants that glowed with soft bioluminescence. Marcus sat, and Shivara settled beside him, her forearms folding in a way that seemed comfortable and natural to her. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus said. "You may ask anything. Yesterday, in the meditation, I felt your emotions. I felt lonely, yes, but I also felt afraid." "What are you afraid of?" Shivara was quiet for a long moment. "I am afraid the prophecy is true," she said finally. "The Shkalan prophecy speaks of a bond between Velkari and a young species that will either bring unprecedented cooperation or catastrophic war. I am afraid that by claiming you, by verifying our bond, I have set events in motion that I cannot control. I am afraid of failing, of being the catalyst for disaster instead of unity." "Why didn't you just ignore the dreams?" Marcus asked. "If you knew claiming me could cause problems, why say anything?" "Because the Kalshama is not something we ignore," Shivara said. "To deny the bond would be to deny a fundamental part of who we are. And because, selfishly, I wanted it to be real. I wanted you to be real. I wanted to believe that I could have something for myself, not just my duty." Marcus understood that better than he wanted to admit. How many times had he buried himself in work, telling himself it was duty, when really it was fear of letting anyone get close. "Tell me about the prophecy," Marcus said. The whole thing, not just the summary. Shivara nodded. The Shalan prophecy was written nearly 2,000 cycles ago by a seer named Shala. She was one of the last of the old psionics, the ones who could see across time with greater clarity than we can now. She warned of a future age when the Valkyrie would face a choice. When we would encounter a species that could become either our greatest ally or our greatest threat. And that species is humanity? The prophecy speaks of starborn wanderers from a young world, a species that burns bright and fast, that carries both creation and destruction in their hearts. It speaks of a bond that will form between their kind and ours, and that this bond will determine the path forward. Unity or division, cooperation or conquest. The prophecy does not say which will come to pass, only that the choice will be made. Marcus felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. And people actually believe this? An ancient prediction written thousands of years ago. The Valkyrie have learned to respect prophecy, Shivara said. Skala predicted 17 other events in her writings, and all 17 came true. The Great War between the northern and southern houses. The plague that killed a third of our population. The arrival of the Krauth species and their initial aggression. She saw these things centuries before they happened. But prophecy doesn't have to be mystical, Marcus said, his engineering mind searching for logic. If your people have precognitive abilities, even limited ones, then what you call prophecy might just be pattern recognition. Seeing probable futures based on current trends and behaviors. Shivara's expression brightened with interest. That is similar to how our modern scholars interpret it. Prophecy is probability mapping rather than absolute fate. But the concern remains the same. The patterns Skala saw pointed toward humanity long before we ever made contact with your species. So, no pressure, Marcus said dryly. We just have to make sure our bond somehow unites the galaxy instead of destroying it. I do not think it is that simple, Shivara said. The prophecy speaks of the bond as the beginning, not the answer itself. What matters is what we do with it. The choices we make together. Before Marcus could respond, an alarm sounded through the gardens. Not a loud siren, but a clear chime that repeated 3 times, a warning of some kind. Shivara was on her feet instantly, and Marcus followed. What is that? He asked. Station alert, Shivara said, already moving toward the exit. Something has happened. They ran through the gardens, Shivara's longer legs carrying her faster, but she slowed to keep pace with Marcus. Other beings were emerging from various parts of the biodome, all moving toward the exits with varying levels of urgency. They burst into the main corridor to find chaos. Security personnel in armor were running toward the commercial district, and Marcus could hear shouting in multiple languages. Smoke drifted from somewhere ahead. Stay here, Shivara commanded, but Marcus shook his head. Not a chance. If something's happening, we figure it out together. Shivara looked like she wanted to argue, but there was no time. They moved forward cautiously, following the security teams. The smoke was thicker now, and Marcus could smell something acrid, like burning electronics. They rounded a corner and found a scene of destruction. One of the smaller garden sections had been bombed. The transparent wall shattered, plants burning, and emergency systems spraying suppressant foam everywhere. Security personnel were setting up a perimeter, and medical teams were helping injured beings. Who did this? Marcus asked, horrified. One of the security officers, a tall being with too many joints in their arms, turned to them. Krauth saboteurs. We caught 2 of them, but they triggered their device before we could stop it. No deaths, but 17 injured. The Krauth, Shivara said, her voice hard. They are making a statement. A statement about what? Marcus demanded. Another voice answered. About you. Marcus turned to see a Krauth representative approaching. The formal bonding ceremony was scheduled for 3 days away, at the conclusion of the summit. 3 days to prepare, to plan, and to convince the galaxy that this bond was not a threat. Marcus spent those days in a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and preparations that left him exhausted and overwhelmed. But he also spent time with Shivara. Real time, away from the politics and ceremonies. They would meet in quiet corners of the station, talking about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Marcus learned that Shivara loved ancient music, that she was terrible at games of strategy despite her political acumen, and that she had a sharp sense of humor that caught him off guard. Shivara learned that Marcus was more emotional than he pretended, that he missed his family fiercely, and that he had a habit of fixing broken things because it was easier than fixing himself. The bond between them grew, not because of prophecy or mystical connections, but because they chose to let it grow. And that made all the difference. On the evening before the ceremony, Marcus sat in his quarters with Ambassador Okonkwo, reviewing the plans one final time. "The Valkyrie Council has agreed to your proposal," Okonkwo said, scrolling through data on her tablet. "The bonding ceremony will also serve as the announcement of the Marcus Protocol, the voluntary bonding program between humans and Valkyrie. Several other species have expressed interest in similar programs for their own people." "That's good," Marcus said, though his stomach was tight with nerves. "What about the Krauth?" "They've lodged formal protests but haven't made any more aggressive moves since the attack. Station security has been doubled, and the Concordance itself has issued warnings about interfering with bonding ceremonies. They're taking this seriously, but they still think this is all some kind of power grab," Marcus said. "Some of them do," Okonkwo admitted, "but others are starting to see the bigger picture. You and Shivara have been careful, deliberate, and transparent about your intentions. That matters. The galaxy is watching, and what they're seeing is two people trying to navigate an impossible situation with grace and honesty." Marcus rubbed his face, exhausted. "I still can't believe this is my life now. A month ago, my biggest worry was whether the moisture collectors on Colony 7 would handle the winter season." Okonkwo smiled slightly. "Welcome to history, Marcus. It's uncomfortable and terrifying, but you're handling it better than most would." After she left, Marcus tried to sleep, but couldn't. His mind kept racing through everything that could go wrong tomorrow. Eventually, he gave up and decided to take a walk through the station. He found himself at the observation deck, staring out at the stars. This was where he and Shivara had stood after the verification, where she had told him about the prophecy and the dangers ahead. So much had changed since then, and yet the stars looked exactly the same, constant, unchanging, indifferent to the chaos of the beings who traveled between them. "I thought I might find you here." Marcus turned to see Shivara approaching. She wore simple robes, and her hair was loose, flowing around her shoulders in a way he had never seen before. She looked younger somehow, less like a noble and more like a person. "Can't sleep?" Marcus asked. "No," Shivara said, joining him at the window. "Tomorrow changes everything, again. I find myself both eager and terrified." "That makes two of us," Marcus said. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Then Shivara spoke, her voice soft. "I need to tell you something, Marcus. Something I discovered recently, and something that changes the nature of our bond." Marcus felt his chest tighten with worry. "What is it?" "Do you remember when we performed the Thalish? The deep joining where we shared memories?" "Of course. That's when I really started to believe this was real. I have been working with Valkyrie scientists to understand the mechanism of our bond," Shivara said. "To understand how the Kalshima works from a scientific perspective, as you suggested. They discovered something remarkable." She pulled out a small device and projected data into the air between them. Marcus saw quantum field readings, consciousness pattern mappings, and temporal markers that his engineering background helped him partially understand. "What am I looking at?" Marcus asked. "This is the moment my dreams of you began. 3 cycles ago," Shivara said, highlighting a specific point in the data. "And this," she shifted the projection, "is when humanity first established quantum communication relay with Valkyrie space." Marcus stared at the 2 timelines. They matched almost perfectly. "The quantum communication relay," Marcus said slowly, understanding dawning. "It created a connection, a pathway." "Exactly," Shivara said. "When your species began using quantum entanglement for communication, it created ripples in the quantum field that our telepathic abilities interact with. My consciousness somehow entangled with yours across that field. The dreams were not mystical prophecy, Marcus. They were quantum resonance. Your thought patterns, your consciousness, literally touched mine through the communication network." Marcus felt his world shifting again. So this wasn't destiny. It was an accident. A side effect of technology. "Yes," Shivara said. "And no. The connection was accidental, but what grew from it was not. We chose each other, Marcus. The quantum field gave us the possibility of connection, but we made it real through our choices." Marcus processed this, turning it over in his mind. Part of him felt relief. This made sense in a way that prophecy and destiny never had. It was science, technology, cause, and effect. But another part of him felt uncertain. "Does this change things?" he asked. "If it wasn't the Kalshima in the traditional sense, if it was just quantum accident, does the bond still mean the same thing?" "That is what I have been asking myself," Shivara said. "And I believe the answer is yes. The method of connection does not diminish what we have built. If anything, it makes it more precious. We were not destined by some cosmic force. We were given a chance, an opportunity, and we chose to take it. That is more powerful than any prophecy." Marcus found himself smiling. "So we're not fulfilling some ancient prediction. We're just 2 people who happened to connect through quantum entanglement and decided to see where it goes." "When you phrase it that way, it sounds almost mundane," Shivara said. And there was humor in her voice. "Nothing about this is mundane," Marcus said. "But I like this version better. I like that we chose this." "So do I," Shivara said softly. They were standing close now, closer than they had before. Marcus could see the patterns of light shifting across her skin, could feel the warmth of her presence. The bond hummed between them, no longer mysterious or frightening. Just a connection between 2 people who had found each other through impossible circumstances. "I'm scared about tomorrow," Marcus admitted. "About standing in front of the entire galaxy and making this official." "I am too," Shivara said. "But I am also certain. I am certain of you, Marcus Chen, of us. Whatever comes next, we will face it together." Marcus reached out and took her hand, as he had in the vision during their first meditation. Her fingers intertwined with his, and it felt right in a way that transcended species or origin. Together, he agreed. The next morning arrived too quickly. Marcus dressed in a formal suit that had been modified to incorporate elements of Valkyrie ceremonial dress, creating something new, something that represented both cultures. He met Ambassador Okonkwo and the rest of the human delegation outside the grand ceremonial hall. "Ready?" Okonkwo asked. "No," Marcus said honestly. "But I'm doing it anyway." The hall was enormous, filled with representatives from hundreds of species. Holographic projections allowed billions more across the galaxy to watch. Marcus walked down the central aisle, aware of every eye on him. Every whisper that followed his steps. Shivara waited at the far end, standing before the Valkyrie Elder Council and representatives from the Galactic Concordance. She wore robes of shifting silver and blue, and she looked radiant. When their eyes met across the distance, Marcus felt the bond flare, a warmth that steadied his nerves. He reached the platform and stood beside her. Elder Thalvin stepped forward to begin the ceremony. "We gather to witness a bonding unlike any in recorded history," Thalvin said, his voice amplified throughout the hall. "A Valkyrie noble and a human engineer. Two species, two worlds, one connection. Let those who have objections speak now." For a moment, Marcus held his breath, half expecting the crowd to interrupt, to protest, to cause another incident. But the hall remained silent. "Then let us proceed," Thalvin said. "Lady Shivara, do you claim this bond freely and of your own will?" "I do," Shivara said, her voice clear and strong. "I claim Marcus Chun as my bonded partner, not through destiny or prophecy, but through choice. We are connected by quantum resonance, by shared experience, and by the decision to build something new together." "Marcus Chun," Thalvin turned to him, "do you accept this bond freely and of your own will?" Marcus took a breath. This was it, the moment that would define his future and possibly change the course of galactic history. He looked at Shivara, at the woman who had been a stranger a week ago, and was now someone he could not imagine being without. "I do," Marcus said. "I accept Shivara as my bonded partner. Not because of prophecy, but because I choose her. Because in the middle of chaos and impossibility, we found something real. And that's worth fighting for." Elder Thalvin raised his hands, and patterns of light danced in the 6 months had passed since the bonding ceremony. Marcus stood in his new office aboard the research station they had named Unity 1, orbiting Earth. Through the wide viewport, he could see the blue marble of his homeworld turning slowly below. It never stopped being beautiful, never stopped feeling like home. Even though he spent most of his time in space now, the station was a joint venture, built by human and Valkyrie engineers working together. It served as headquarters for the Marcus Protocol and as a research facility studying the quantum bonding phenomenon. 63 human Valkyrie bonded pairs now lived and worked on the station. With hundreds more in various stages of the bonding process, it had not been an easy 6 months. The Krauth Dominion had made their opposition clear through economic sanctions and border disputes. Several neutral species had chosen to distance themselves from both humanity and the Valkyrie, wary of the growing alliance. There had been protests on Earth from those who feared alien influence, and protests on the Valkyrie homeworld from traditionalists, who saw human bonding as dilution of their culture. But there had also been successes. Trade agreements flourished between Earth and Valkyrie space. Technology exchanges accelerated human development in areas that would have taken decades otherwise. Cultural programs brought Valkyrie artists and thinkers to Earth, and human explorers to Valkyrie worlds. The bonds themselves proved stable and enriching for those who chose them, creating partnerships that benefited both individuals and their communities. Marcus heard the door open behind him and felt Shivara's presence before he turned. The bond had grown stronger over the months, not overwhelming but comforting. A constant awareness of each other that felt natural now. "You are brooding again," Shivara said, moving to stand beside him at the viewport. She wore a research jumpsuit today, practical and comfortable, her formal robes reserved for diplomatic occasions. "Not brooding," Marcus said. "Reflecting." "The same thing, spoken differently," Shivara replied, but her tone was warm. "What troubles you?" "I just got off a call with my sister," Marcus said. "She's getting married next month, to a Valkyrie man named Philin. They met through the Marcus Protocol. That troubles you?" Shivara asked, surprised. "No, I'm happy for her," Marcus said quickly. "She seems genuinely in love, and Philin is a good man. It just made me think about how quickly things are changing. My sister is marrying an alien. That sentence would have been insane a year ago, but now it's just normal. We're becoming something new, humans and Volcari both, and I wonder if we're ready for it. Change is always uncomfortable, Shivara said. But that does not make it wrong. Your sister found connection and happiness. That is what the protocol was meant to achieve. I know, Marcus said. And the data shows that the bonded pairs are thriving. Lower stress levels, higher life satisfaction, better problem solving when working together. The quantum connection seems to enhance partnership rather than override individuality. You say this as if you are surprised, Shivara observed. Maybe I am, Marcus admitted. Part of me still can't believe this whole thing works. That something that started as an accident became something so significant. Before Shivara could respond, an alert chimed on Marcus's communication device. He checked it and felt his expression grow serious. What is it? Shivara asked. Ambassador Okonkwo needs to see us immediately. Something about the Galactic Concordance. They made their way to the conference room where Okonkwo waited with several advisors from both human and Valkyrie governments. The ambassador's face was grave. We have a situation, Okonkwo said without preamble. The Krauth Dominion has issued an ultimatum to the Concordance. They're demanding that the Marcus Protocol be suspended and that all current bonded pairs be separated. They claim the quantum bonding represents a form of technological manipulation that violates concordance laws against forced assimilation. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. That's ridiculous. Every bonding is voluntary. We have extensive screening processes. Nobody is forced into anything. They are arguing that the quantum connection itself constitutes coercion, one of the Valkyrie advisors explained. That humans and Valkyrie cannot give true consent because the entanglement influences their emotions and choices. That's not how it works, Marcus protested. The connection enhances empathy and communication, but it doesn't override free will. Every bonded pair has confirmed this. We know that, Okonkwo said. But the Krauth are using it as a pretext. What they really want is to prevent the human-Valkyrie alliance from growing stronger. They see us as a threat to the existing power structure. What happens if we refuse their ultimatum? Shivara asked. They're threatening to leave the Concordance and convince other species to join them, Okonkwo said. They already have support from at least 7 other species who are wary of rapid human expansion. If they succeed in creating a rival alliance, it could split the galaxy. The very war the prophecy warned about. The room fell silent. This was the nightmare scenario they had all feared. The moment when the bond stopped being about 2 people and became a catalyst for galactic conflict. We need to address the Concordance directly, Marcus said. All of us. Every bonded pair. We need to show them that we're not a threat, that we're not being manipulated. We need to prove that connection and cooperation are possible without conquest or coercion. That is a significant risk, one of the advisors said. Putting all the bonded pairs in one place, making ourselves vulnerable while tensions are high. It is also an opportunity, Shivara said, to demonstrate our commitment to peace, to show that we are willing to be transparent and accountable. Okonkwo considered this for a long moment. It would be unprecedented. A joint address to the Concordance from all bonded pairs. It would either resolve this crisis or make it catastrophically worse. Then we need to make sure it resolves it, Marcus said. The preparations took 2 weeks. The Concordance agreed to hear the address, and Unity 1 became the staging ground for what the media was calling the most important speech in galactic history. All 63 bonded pairs gathered, along with representatives from dozens of species, to witness what would happen next. Marcus and Shivara would speak first, as the first bonded pair and the symbolic heart of the protocol. They had prepared remarks but agreed to speak mostly from the heart, to be genuine rather than diplomatic. The day of the address arrived. Marcus stood backstage with Shivara, watching through monitors as the Concordance chamber filled. Every seat was occupied, every holographic connection active. Billions would be watching across the galaxy. I am terrified, Shivara admitted quietly. Me too, Marcus said. But we have to do this. For everyone who has chosen to bond. For everyone who might choose it in the future. For the future itself. Together, Shivara said, taking his hand. Together, Marcus agreed. They walked onto the stage together, standing before the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Marcus felt the weight of every eye, every expectation, every fear and hope riding on their words. Members of the Galactic Concordance, Marcus began, his voice steady despite his nerves. 6 months ago, I stood in a ceremonial hall and bonded with Shivara of the Valkyrie. At the time, I barely knew her. I was terrified, confused, and certain that this would end in disaster. I was wrong. He paused, letting the words settle. The bond did not rob me of my identity or my free will. It did not make me less human. Instead, it gave me partnership, understanding, and a connection that has enriched my life in ways I could never have imagined. I am still Marcus Chun, still an engineer from Earth, still someone who loves his family and his homeworld. But I am also someone who has learned to see the universe through someone else's eyes, to understand experiences beyond my own, to build something new from the combination of different perspectives. Shivara stepped forward. I am still Valkyrie, she said. Still bound by the responsibilities of my position, still devoted to the welfare of my people. The bond did not erase my culture or my values. It expanded them. Through Marcus, I have learned about human resilience, human creativity, human determination. I have learned that different does not mean lesser. That connection across difference is not weakness, but strength. One by one, the other bonded pairs came forward. Each spoke briefly about their experience, their journey, their choice. A human scientist and a Valkyrie philosopher who were collaborating on new theories of consciousness. A Valkyrie merchant and a human artist who had created a new form of art that blended both their traditions. A human pilot and a Valkyrie navigator who had charted new routes through dangerous space. Each story was different. Each bond was unique. But the message was the same. Choice, partnership, unity without erasure. When the last pair had spoken, Marcus stepped forward again. The crowd claimed that we are being manipulated, that our bonds are not voluntary. I understand their fear. Change is frightening. The unknown is threatening. But fear cannot be allowed to dictate policy. Evidence must matter. Facts must matter. And the fact is that every bonded pair you have heard from today chose their path freely. We are not victims. We are not pawns. We are people who found connection and decided to nurture it. The quantum entanglement between